Okay, this is probably a somewhat belated video, given the topic. I had all the clips for this organised a little bit over, well, roughly 2.5 weeks ago, and then of course I broke my shoulder, which meant that I wasn't actually working on any videos for a little while. And of course, as you know, since then I've been keeping it kind of light in terms of what I was working on, just because of difficulties with concentrating, difficulties with collecting clips, and all the sort of stuff that goes hand in hand with being a one-armed bandit. Okay, so in this video I want to have a look at the St. Cloud connection, because it really bothers me that Maddie was actually found on the property adjacent to where Jen's friends live. Supposedly, Jen knew nothing about what happened to Maddie. Supposedly, she knew nothing about Stefan's late night trips. And I've done videos where I've questioned this. So, if you're not familiar with my playlist, worth having a look back through some of the more recent videos, and just having a look at some of the things that I've discussed with regards to Jen, Stefan, and with regards to Chris and Deb Stearns. I think there's a lot of people who know a lot more than they claim to have, or who knew a lot more than they claim that they knew. Yes, you will probably hear the chihuahua snoring in the background. It's the weather's cooled off drastically over the last couple of days, so she's snuggled up in her little bed under my desk here and snoring away like a trooper. So I've mentioned in a few videos now that there's a lot of things that make me wonder if Jen helped Stefan cover up what he did. And this latest with the St. Cloud location certainly has me questioning this. So I'm going to go through various statements made by people, starting with excerpts from the interview with Jen's friend. Hence the reason that I put that video up yesterday, because I needed the excerpts. And I just want to discuss what this could possibly mean. So let's just jump in.
I knew her a long time ago. She probably when she was like eight-ish.
And this is Maddie, or
Maddie and Jen.
Okay.
And sometimes we would go hiking with her in Lake Lizzy. It wasn't so much me, but my partner. And
At the reserve over there?
Yeah, Lake Lizzy.
No doubt most of you are pretty familiar with this map by now. So you've got Lake Lizzy up near the top of the screen there, and down the bottom you've got the red pin, which is where Maddie was found. Now, sure, you've got Alligator Lake and Buck Lake, which are probably closer to where Maddie was found. But let's say that you wanted to find a secluded area where you knew that you wouldn't be interrupted. You'd want to go with somewhere that you are familiar with. Jen was familiar with Lake Lizzy. We hear this from this person, and we hear it from Jen. So why would Stefan be on this route if he was headed for Lake Lizzy? A few reasons. If you look at the other way of getting to Lake Lizzy, going from the top of Alligator Lake, there's a lot of houses in that area. Whereas the way he went along Old Hickory Tree Road, and Hickory Tree Road is quite secluded. Not a lot of houses, not a lot of residential places. It would give you a fairly direct route to the hiking area at Lake Lizzy. But not only that, if I were to give you directions as to how to find a specific location that I went to frequently, how would I give you those directions? I would basically tell you the route that I'm familiar with, wouldn't I? So let's just think about, let's be hypothetical here and say Jen said, okay, well, now you've got to find somewhere to, you've got to deal with this problem, you've got to find somewhere to take Maddie. Here's how to get to Lake Lizzy. She's familiar with Lake Lizzy. She knows it's a dense hiking area, so it's secluded. How would she get there? Well, she used to go hiking with this friend. So for her, she would have gone to this friend's house first, and then gone from the friend's house to Lake Lizzy. Meaning, the route that Stearns was taking would have been the exact same route that Jen would have used to have been taken. Bad grammar there, sorry. But the direct route that Jen would have used in the past when she was going hiking at Lake Lizzy. It's not the most direct route to Lake Lizzy, but it was the route that would have been used by Jen, going to her friend's place and then going on to Lake Lizzy. Curious, right?
And then she hooked up with that guy,
Okay.
Stefan. And I, again, just trying to remember, we probably knew them maybe another 4 to 6 months. Well, we didn't like them.
Okay, you could argue that given that these guys were still friends with Jen for another 6 months after she hooked up with Stefan, that maybe he is familiar with the area, maybe he had heard discussions with Jen of, I'm going to go out hiking at Lake Lizzy. But then that goes back to the question of, why take that particular route, the route that goes directly past the friend's house? Why not take a more direct route? Now, maybe he wasn't even headed for Lake Lizzy, and maybe this is all one hell of a coincidence. But it seems like Lake Lizzy keeps coming up.
Did they ever spend any time out here? Have they ever come here to visit?
Oh, she did come. Maddie came, not him. He never came here.
Okay.
We would never. I mean, I'm telling you, not like that guy. She came here a couple times because they would hike and sometimes just get a drink or something, and before they left or something like that. But I couldn't tell you how often. You know.
So did Jen come out here with Maddie too?
Yeah.
Okay. But Stefan never came out here.
No.
Not even sitting out in the car or anything like that.
No. Courtney didn't like him.
So she's quite adamant there that Stearns had never been to their place with Jen and Maddie at any point in time because her partner did not like him, meaning that Jen would have known that he wasn't welcome, so even just sitting in the car wouldn't have happened. So once again, it goes back to the question of, well, is it just one hell of a coincidence that he just happened to end up leaving Maddie in the location where he did? Or was he given directions to go somewhere like Lake Lizzy and had the blowout in his car and had to have a change of plans?
Do you know anybody that lives in St. Cloud? Do you know where St. Cloud is?
St. Cloud, that's north or south or
East.
east?
East of Kissimmee.
Yeah. I haven't been out there too much. But yeah, I'm familiar with St. Cloud.
Okay. Whereabouts in St. Cloud? Like, do you know friends out there, or?
I don't have any friends really. I've driven out there a few times before. Mostly just when I'm meandering up and down 192.
Were you out there this week?
Yeah, I was out there sometime this week. Sometimes I drive. just drive the meander around and explore and drive till I don't know where I am and drive till I know where I am again. And
Now, obviously, Stearns is the biggest liar on the planet, but I believe him when he says he's got no friends out that way, because I'd imagine he's the sort of guy that didn't have very many friends. When they ask him about having been out that way before, he doesn't say anything about, like, oh, well, Jen's taken me out that way, or anything like that. It's all about, oh, sometimes I just drive around because I feel like it. So, from what we're hearing, Stearns is not overly familiar with St. Cloud. Maybe it's a lie. But the interesting thing is that the things that Stearns lies about are not so much... The way he lies, I've noticed, is not the same as Jen. She will just outright lie about stuff. And you'll find it out later because she'll contradict herself. Stearns, on the other hand, will throw in little truths here and there when it doesn't matter about telling the truth. So for him to say that he doesn't know anyone out at St. Cloud and that sometimes he'll just drive around, I think they could well be truths, because they're not anything that's him trying to cover up for himself. He could say he knows someone out at St. Cloud, but that would be provable. I don't know. But according to him, he knows no one out at St. Cloud, and he's not overly familiar with the area. Of course, it's a red flag to me when he pretends that he doesn't even know where St. Cloud is. I think he knew full well, of course, he knew full well where St. Cloud was. So we know that that's a lie. But, yeah, we know there isn't an obvious connection for him with St. Cloud.
Is she outdoorsy at all? Does she like camping?
We used to go hiking.
Okay.
But we haven't done that in a while.
Okay. Where did you go? Was it around here?
Where would we go? We'd go hiking in like St. Cloud. Lake Lizzy Preserve is what it's called.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not too far.
It's about 35 minutes away.
Yeah, okay.
On 182. Lake Lizzy Preserve. We've also walked Shingle Creek before, but we haven't done that in a very long while.
So Jen actually brought up St. Cloud on her own without prompting. They were just asking about if Maddie was outdoorsy in places they might have gone. And she volunteers Lake Lizzy at St. Cloud. So that's interesting that the first place that comes to mind for her just happens to be possibly where Stefan was en route to. It all links in together a little bit too conveniently, if you ask me.
Where would he take her? There's nowhere I can think that he could take her that I hadn't heard of or known about or would be familiar with. Because if not, I would tell you. Okay, she could be here. She could be here. She could be here. There's nowhere I can think of.
Who does he know that lives in St. Cloud? You know where St. Cloud is.
I do know where St. Cloud is. Does he know anyone in St. Cloud?
Him or you?
I know people in St. Cloud.
Where? Where do they live?
I haven't seen him in a long while though. But one person lives close to Harmony.
Okay.
So driving all the way down St. Cloud, passing St. Cloud a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
One person lives in St. Cloud, like off of Old Canoe Creek Road.
Okay.
Anyone he knows, I can't think of anyone that he would know.
Now, in the previous interview, they had discussed with her places that outdoorsy places that Maddie might like to go. And Lake Lizzy was brought up as one of those places and as a place that Maddie really loved. So that should be the first place that comes to mind when you're talking about St. Cloud. Because she's only just been talking about that, and by her own admission, these are people that she hasn't seen in a long while. Now, before we get to that, when they bring up St. Cloud, even though she's been discussing it before in relation to Maddie and bushwalking, or, sorry, what do you call it, hiking, when they ask her in relation to Stefan, you get one of those long pauses that we know is Jen's way of either trying to frame the lie that she's about to tell you, or trying to avoid answering something that she doesn't want to answer. So you get the long pause, and then you get a dismissal of the question. Because they've asked her if Stefan knows anyone out that way, and she says she doesn't believe so. Then they've asked her if she knows anyone else out that way. Her dismissal is, I haven't seen them for a long while, though. Essentially, well, I know people out that way, but don't bother asking me about them because it's not like I go see them every day. Major dismissal. So we have the pause, either trying to avoid answering, which in this case I believe is the case, or trying to frame the lie. And then, like I said, having established that she does know people out that way, instead of going to discussing the person who she has most recently connected with in her mind, as in Sylvia and Courtney, who live on Hickory Tree Road, she's really vague about, well, there's one friend that's close to Harmony, but then she's really specific about another friend being on Old Canoe Road. What's interesting here is that Old Canoe Road is way over the other side. I'll show you that on a map later, because she goes into a bit more detail about that. She is really specific about that friend, not so specific about Courtney and Sylvia. Let's keep listening.
Who is in St. Cloud?
I know people in St. Cloud, and he doesn't know where they live.
Does he know those same people?
He's met them before and talked to them before when they've come over here.
Okay. Where do they live in St. Cloud?
Off of Old Canoe Creek Road. Do you want me to get you an address?
Sure.
Has he ever went with you to go see him?
No.
Never.
No. I've never even gone to her house like that to hang out. She always comes to my house. So they know each other. She lives in St. Cloud, but we've never gone to St. Cloud together with her, to her house.
And how do you know her? She work with you?
Yeah, she's an old coworker from 14, 15 years ago.
From Disney?
No, we used to work at a pizzeria. That was when I was a lot younger.
So obviously now the question about St. Cloud is no longer a surprise to her, because she's been asked that in a previous interview. And what changes in her response? First of all, she comes out with, only I know people from St. Cloud and he doesn't know where they live. Important bit of information for them to know. When they ask her, does he know these people? There's a long pause. As soon as we're talking about St. Cloud, Jen's being very careful about her answers. Here, once again, there's a long pause in terms of, to me, that says she's thinking through really carefully how to answer these questions. And then she establishes that, well, he's met and talked to them here. They've gone to her, he's never been out that way. Is that true? We don't know. We know from Sylvia that that is perhaps the case, but we don't know anything at all from this other friend. And then, like I said, now the St. Cloud thing is no longer a surprise to Jen. She's had time to think it through, and she goes straight again to talking about a friend from 14, 15 years ago, as opposed to a friend from 7 or 8 years ago. The friend that she used to work with, who lives somewhere off of Old Canoe Road. In fact, she doesn't even know the specific address for that friend. She can't find it on a map by the sounds of it. So that sounds like that is a friend who she's less likely to think of normally than the friend whose place she used to stop at for drinks coming back from going hiking out at Lake Lizzy, whose place she would have been going past whenever she went to Lake Lizzy, and whose place she would have been to far more recently. So there's definitely an interesting bit of evasion going on here. Maybe it's just Jen being Jen, but I do find it interesting that she's being so careful not to be specific about her friends who live out towards Lake Lizzy, and then the second time around they don't even really rate a mention.
So she lives off of this road right here, Nolte Road in St. Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Nolte. That's 192 right there.
Yep.
Old Canoe Creek, Nolte. She lives around there.
Would you be able to point it to me?
To which house? No.
Not the specific house, but like, is it in a neighborhood? Does she have her own land?
It is in a neighborhood. I don't remember where though. I don't know how far down. I have to drive down Nolte.
Are you familiar with Nolte?
No.
No.
No, I think I've only dropped her off at her house once.
Drop Maddie off there?
No. My friend.
Oh, your friend. Gotcha.
The thing is, I don't think Stefan would know where she lives, but...
No, I'm not saying that he did, but I'm just trying to see who you would know in St. Cloud.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only person. There might be somebody else that lives, like, closer to Harmony, but that's the only people I know.
So while you can see that Old Canoe Road does actually head down in the direction where Stefan's eventually headed, at the same time, when she gets more specific and mentions that it's off Nolte Road, you can see that's way away from where Stefan actually took Maddie. And of course it's in the middle of a residential area. And she says, well, I don't think he would know where she lived. And she points out that she only knows where this friend lives because she dropped her off only once. She's only been to this friend's house once. This is a friend from 14, 15 years ago. Now, she hasn't specifically said when it was that she dropped her friend off, but I'm thinking if she's talking about them having worked together previously, it was probably when they were working together 14, 15 years ago. And yet this is the person who she thinks of first, instead of talking about the friend who lives out towards Lake Lizzy. And then, just to top it all off, she says, she's pretty much the only person I know out there. Oh, there might be somebody else. In other words, yeah, there's two people, but let's not talk about the other person. This is a person I want you to focus on because this is miles away from where Maddie actually is. I just find it really fascinating that despite having clearly been to this other friend's house way more times, far more recently, she's focusing on a friend who lives the other side of St. Cloud, nowhere near where Maddie was found. And a friend who basically she has been to their place once, and clearly there is no way that Stefan would have even the faintest idea where this friend lived. Not to mention the fact that even if she were to say to Stefan, oh, here's some instructions how to get there, clearly she doesn't know exactly how to get there because she had to actually find out. So she's giving them the least likely answer of the two answers that she could possibly give, which is really fascinating.
Because from what you guys have told me, he went to St. Cloud, he went to 192. Could you guys tell where he turned on on any of these roads? It's just that he was on the main road? I didn't think he ever, even knew where St. Cloud was, because we've never driven down that way ever.
You live in Kissimmee, right?
Yeah, I know, but to me, he's never had a reason to ever drive down to St. Cloud. Ever. There's no store or anything he goes to down there. Everything is in Kissimmee or Orlando by the mall.
Florida Mall?
Yeah.
LA Mall?
Yeah, Florida. I sent the last detective 3 spots. I could have recalled him telling me he wanted to visit.
So this is the interview where they're trying to tighten the screws. They're trying to get Jen, if she knows, to say where Maddie actually is. And what does she do? She turns it back on them. She wants to know if they know where he went in St. Cloud off 192. She's very, very specific there. She wants to know what they know before she gives them any information. That is always a red flag in these kinds of interviews. She should be wanting to help in any way to find her daughter, but instead she wants to know what they know. Could you guys tell where he turned? That's more of a concern to her than trying to help find her daughter. And then she claims, well, I didn't think he even knew the area. We've never driven that way. Okay, well, maybe you've never driven that way together. Why does it have to be somewhere that you've both been? She's giving answers here that are very, very evasive. She's trying to convince them that he's got no reason to be out in St. Cloud. He wouldn't go out that way. She's never taken him out there. He wouldn't know where St. Cloud is, even though it's, 35 minutes down the road. There's places 35 minutes from here where I've not been there, but I know where they are. And she turns around and says, well, he's never had reason to go that way. And she starts talking about shops. Even going so far as to say, well, I sent the last detective 3 spots, as in 3 shopping places, that he frequents. Well, that was a really dumb thing to say, because he's not likely to go to a shopping mall and leave Maddie there. So she's doing her best to steer the conversation well away from St. Cloud, well away from any possibility of him having gone out to St. Cloud at all.
So I need you to sit down and think about it. Whether you need a minute, we're not in this room, whether you want to do it with us in this room, we need to leave here with an idea of where we can go look for. That is one thing we can agree on.
I've sent you the list of the stores that he may have stopped at, didn't stop at. The only outdoorsy places I can think of that we've ever gone to that he would know about would be Shingle Creek or Kissimmee Trail. I don't know if he knows where Lake Toho is, but that could be another option.
Because you think it's a wooded area, because it's a place you guys have talked about together?
Because it's a wooded area with a lake, with gators. Like, we haven't discussed anything. This topic, I never asked him if he directly. I never thought he could have.
Now we're finally seeing a bit of emotion from Jen. But is it emotion over Maddie? No. It's emotion because they've essentially said, well, we're going to sit here until we figure out where Maddie is. And she goes back to, well, I've given you a list of stores. And then, well, you know, outdoor places we've been, and lists a few places that are nowhere near St. Cloud. Please look anywhere, but don't look at St. Cloud. But then she does bring up Lake Toho. Now, Lake Toho is a really, really long name that ends in Toho. I can't pronounce it. I'm not even going to try. So she's starting to move in that direction. But when you look at the map... Oh, okay. When you look at the map, you see that it actually starts with Toho, not ends with Toho. But when you look at the map, it's one of the lakes furthest away from where Maddie was. Again, we're back in the direction of Old Canoe Creek Road. But we're even further away now than from the location where Maddie was found. She knows they're focusing on St. Cloud, and she's trying to send them off to the far side. First of all, it's off Old Canoe Creek Road, somewhere off Nolte Crescent. And that map, that dot there, is actually lower down. If you remember, I showed you it was higher up. This map is mainly because I want to show you where Lake Toho is. Lake Toho, definitely separated from all the other lakes in the area where he was headed. But then we have what I think is a little bit of leakage here. She refers to a wooded area with a lake and gators. Well, wouldn't you know, that could describe Lake Lizzy, which she's so very careful about avoiding talking about that whole area. You've also got Alligator Lake, which is really close to where Maddie was found, and Pearl Lake, which I said is basically on the property adjacent to where Maddie was found. If you look under Alligator Lake, you can just faintly see the red dot that shows where Maddie was. Definitely, she wants to keep them out of that area by the looks of it. No idea why Lake Toho came up. When there's all these other lakes, you would think that for her, the most immediate one to come up to think of would be Lake Lizzy or Alligator Lake. Maybe if someone's from the area, maybe you can tell me if perhaps Lake Toho is just a well-known lake because it is much larger. Don't know, but it's interesting that even when they're trying to pressure her to give answers and to come back to St. Cloud, she talks about the opposite side from where Maddie was located.
So we need fruitful searches.
Yeah.
So I need likely places that you think, and I need places you think based off of conversations with him, not because you can picture in your mind that there's trees there.
Okay. There's no conversation I can think of where he's named interest in being anywhere near woods or it being along his way.
You said he got a flat tire. Tell me about the flat tire you got.
So he said he got a flat tire. I'm not sure when he got a flat tire, but he said he got a flat tire and then came directly home, and he got home around 2:40. So flat tire, he said
he was driving down 192 and it just popped and shredded and fell apart. And he pulled over into a plaza and changed a tire for the first time in a very long time, and said he hurt himself doing it. The frame of the car, something came down on his finger.
All his lies, I don't care, but I want to know what you question him about. Why was he there? What was he doing? There's no way you're the most trusting woman in the world. You just don't ask clarifying questions. I know no relationship I've ever been in is that trusting. He just tells you he's gone at 3 in the morning getting a fucking Wawa, and you're like, ah, whatever, bet. Same thing with this. It's like, oh, I got a flat tire, was here. Why is he at these places? Do you not question him? Why were you on 192? Why did you dip out at 3 in the morning with my car?
I didn't know he did that.
Because this is 2 times he went to 192. He went to 192 the day she disappeared, right? He's roaming, looking for her, south of where she went missing, because supposedly she went missing. And 192 is south of where that is.
And
not very likely that that's the route she went on foot or abducted, and that him driving around is somehow going to locate her.
And he did tell. I did question that. I was like, when I asked him where he searched and he said 182, I said, why? That's nowhere where she would be.
So again, we get another emotional reaction from Jen, but it's still not about Maddie. She's pissed off at them. She's angry because they nail her for essentially not asking Stefan any questions about where the F he's been, or, you know, any of these questions. And they gave her a whole list of questions that, you know, any person would ask their partner. And she gets angry at them. And then she comes out with, and this is obviously first thing that popped into her head, why would you search at 192? She wouldn't be out that way, or something along those lines. Not what you would expect to hear from a parent whose child is missing and they have no idea where the child has been. And supposedly everyone has searched in the area where she was supposed to have been dropped off. You would want people to be searching anywhere. If you had people volunteering to drive to another state and search, you might still think it was a bit odd, but you'd still be grateful of any kind of searching that was going on. But note how through this whole conversation where they're trying to get her to help them with some clues as to where Maddie is, she's so reluctant. You're getting the pauses. She really doesn't want to have this conversation. And she's still being very careful to avoid mentioning anything to do with the area where Maddie actually is. They ask her if he spoke to her about the flat tyre, and there's a long pause from Jen. Why is there a long pause? She has to think about her answer there. And what does she do? She starts parroting his story again. It varies a little bit. I think they didn't have enough time to work on this end of the story. Maybe they worked more on the first part of the story. And maybe I'm being unfair to Jen to accuse her of having concocted a story with Stefan. But when she comes back and parrots his stories so efficiently, you've just got to wonder. So she's basically doing her best to avoid any suggestions of where Stefan could have been. She comes out with the story of him getting a flat on 192 and pulling into a plaza. Well, we know he pulled into a plaza, but that was earlier in the day, and that had nothing to do with the flat tyre. That was because he relocated Maddie into the boot of his car. So it's really interesting that she mentions this pulling into a plaza. And I know that came from him, but even still, she's got his story down pat. She may not have this part of it word for word, like matching his, but she knows the story really well. And yeah, still hasn't placed him anywhere in St. Cloud. But at the same time, even though she hasn't done that, have you noticed she's skirting around the area? So we're talking about wooded areas with lakes and gators, Lake Toho, somewhere off 192. She's definitely skirting around the area, but trying to direct them to the other side of St. Cloud.
What is in your mind leading you to believe that is the ending to the story?
Because 192 seems like a really busy strip, and I can't think of anywhere immediately, like, other than going deep into St. Cloud, like passing St. Cloud, like going into Holapa or Harmony, that I could see some stashing the body somewhere around there. But Northport has so many wooded areas, and I feel like, I don't know, he would be familiar with both areas. I just don't know him to ever drive down 182 super far down, like into St. Cloud. But I've known him to drive around all around Northport.
Did you pick up on her just mentioning that he actually does know the St. Cloud area? After saying before that he's never had any reason to go there, he wouldn't know St. Cloud, yada yada, she then has just said that he knows the St. Cloud area. But having said that, she redirects them back down to somewhere around near his parents' place, claiming that he knows that far better. But she also, once again, it's like, look the other way, please. She talks about off 192 and sort of going deep off 192 and essentially saying, but, you know, don't look there. You wouldn't do that. He'd have to be going deep off 192 where there's nothing around. Well, that's exactly what he did. And yes, that is Amira under my desk, sound asleep, snoring. You can tell that the weather's getting cooler. For some reason, when it's cooler, she sleeps better. I think we all do though, don't we? So, yeah, Jen is determined to get them to look anywhere but deep into St. Cloud. He'd have no reason to go that way. Go look down at Northport instead. Go look over at Lake Toho. Probably have a look at a wooded area, but don't go deep into St. Cloud off 192, because he'd never do that.
If I had the truth, I would tell you. I don't know anything.
Jennifer, where do you think he took her?
If I were him and I had to stash a body, but I would never do this. My mind would say to go to Lake Toho. There's a lot of woods there, there's a lot of gators. I don't want to think, but go.
Now, when someone says, if I had the truth, I would tell you, that's a massive red flag. Because if someone is telling the truth, they're generally not going to have to protest all that much over the fact that they are telling the truth. Usually, when someone is so insistent that if I knew the truth, I would tell you, you've got to question what they do actually know. And then when he asks her, where do you think he would take her, we get another one of her long pauses, more thinking time. And then she's quite measured the way she says this. If I were him, and she pauses again, And then she talks again about stashing a body. That whole very impersonal separation from Maddie. Maddie's no longer Maddie. Maddie's just a body now. And she goes back to Lake Toho. Look over at the other side of St. Cloud. It's clear that they're focusing in on St. Cloud. So go look over the other side, over there. Don't look that way. Maybe I'm being unfair on Jen here, but just the way that she's reacting, the emotions that she's showing are frustration and anger, but nothing over Maddie being missing. It's more about them questioning her and pressuring her to give information. And she's really not comfortable with this line of questioning.
That's why I find it really strange that you guys say St. Cloud, because I've never gone into St. Cloud with him before.
So you told me you have a friend in St. Cloud.
I do.
I don't know if he knows, but explain to him where she lives, who she is. Explain that relationship to him, because I don't think he's aware of it.
No.
Oh, okay. So one of my really good friends lives off of Old Canoe Creek Road, off Nolte.
Okay.
I don't know what neighborhood though. She's one of my really good friends. She's somebody I know that lives in St. Cloud. She's one of like 2 people I know that live in St. Cloud. She's hung out with us, as in me and Stefan before. She's come over to hang out with me, and Stefan would be hanging out there too, so we would all kind of hang out together. But yeah, she's just a friend.
And you're 100% sure he's never been to her house?
Yes.
Do they have their own friendship? Or is it just that's your friend and the only time he ever talks to her or hangs out with her is with you?
Exactly. Just my friend. He would talk when she was around.
And you just told me about the second person in St. Cloud. Who is that?
Somebody I haven't seen in a long time. Her name is Courtney Brackman. She lives... Can you pull up the map?
Mm-hmm.
But he's never been over to her house either.
Now, they've explained to her multiple times about the connection with him and St. Cloud and his vehicle being seen in that area. She knows that they are focused on St. Cloud because they believe that's where he was last. She also knows that he told her that he had that flat tyre on 192. And yet, she says to the detectives, oh, it's strange that you guys say St. Cloud because I've never gone into St. Cloud with him before. So again, it comes back to, well, it couldn't possibly be there because we've never been there together. Well, who cares if you were there with him or not, Jen? We're worrying more about where he could have been and where he could have taken Maddie. And then the detectives redirect her again to talk about her friends in St. Cloud. And she goes straight back again, having had time to reflect, to talking about the friend who lives somewhere off Old Canoe Road. And she talks about how, well, she's hung out with us. Basically, she's saying, well, we've not been out to her place, but she's hung out with us a lot. So Stefan kind of knows her. But, at the same time, well, Stefan kind of knows her, but she's not one of Stefan's actual friends. She's just, he knows her through me kind of thing. No mention of the other friend other than a really quick brush off. Something along the lines of, oh, and there's another friend. Nothing more. And thankfully the detectives picked up on that. And then after she'd finished going on about her friend who lives off Old Canoe Road, the detectives redirected her again to talk about this second friend. And this time, you get the long pause again. She's once again trying to figure out how to tackle this question. She doesn't want to go there. And once again, tries to brush it off with, well, I haven't seen her in a long time. So, don't look at this friend. I haven't seen her in a long time, so couldn't possibly be any connection there. And she lives, and that's as far as she goes. She doesn't actually give any geographic reference there. She just says, oh, can you pull up the map? Now, if I was going to talk about where someone I knew lived, I would give a generalisation. So, maybe, you know, oh, she lives up the top of that really big hill in North Bendigo. I don't know if there is a North Bendigo. But you know what I mean. Or, oh, she lives over the far side of Melbourne, out towards the Dandenongs, or something like that. But no generalisation as to the area that she lives in. She just wants to have a look at a map. Was she about to say she lives over near Alligator Lake, or she lives over towards Lake Lizzy? Who knows? But she certainly wasn't going to give up any immediate information about where this friend lives, even though she's got a better idea of where that friend lives than where her other friend lives, because according to her, she's only been to that other friend's house once.
She lives somewhere in this area over here. Around here. Lake Lizzy to me is familiar. I would go hiking there often.
There's a preserve there.
Yeah, a few years ago, we would go hiking all the time with my friend Courtney, the one who lives right by there.
With Stefan?
No, Stefan would never come.
Now, would you tell him you're going to Lake Lizzy Preserve?
I've mentioned it before, yeah, when we've gone.
Man, you got to respect those detectives. They really had to work hard to get that out of her. Finally, mention of Lake Lizzy comes up, and how she'd been there quite frequently with her friend Courtney, who lives by there. And the connection. Would you tell him you were going there? And I've mentioned it to him before. So she's basically gone round and round in circles, talking about all these other places that he supposedly knows nothing about, has no connection to, and they keep pushing and they keep pushing. And finally she mentions the one place that he would have heard of. And surprise, surprise, to get there, you go along the road where Maddie was found. And they pick up on this too, they nail her for it. You know, we've asked you about locations, and, you know, she spouted all this crap. Go to Northport, check out the shopping malls, go to the other side of St. Cloud. But she never mentioned it. So they're nailing her on this, and she's like, well, I mentioned my friends. I'm not sure if I mentioned Lake Lizzy before. No, you didn't mention Lake Lizzy before, Jen. And you put all the emphasis on the other friend who lived the other side of St. Cloud. So they've really, really had to work to get this out of her. And you would think that given the information that she's just shared, basically that this is a spot that she used to frequent quite a lot with Maddie, and that she's spoken to him about that spot. As far as we can tell, that's the only spot in St. Cloud that she's ever spoken to Stearns about. And yet it didn't occur to her to mention it. I just find that to be somewhat unbelievable.
When we talked about St. Cloud and, he had asked for your top 5 places, why did this ever cross your mind?
Lake Lizzy?
Any of these places in St. Cloud that you're familiar with?
I mentioned them the first time St. Cloud was brought up. I mentioned my 2 friends that live there. And then, I don't know if I ever mentioned Lake Lizzy. Not sure.
Do you know if Lake Lizzy was special?
She did enjoy going out there.
Was she verbal about that? Like, did she make that known to you guys?
She always told me that if we were to go hiking out there, to let her know, because I've gone hiking without her. I want to go. But it's been a really long time since I've done a hike down Lake Lizzy with her.
So now we're finding out that Lake Lizzy, that she was so careful to avoid mentioning, was actually an important place for her and Maddie, and that Maddie liked going out there, and that she had said on occasions to Jen, if you're going out to Lake Lizzy, let me know. Meaning that this is a conversation that's probably been had several times in front of Stearns. So why does she avoid, for all those interviews, talking about Lake Lizzy when they are pushing and pushing for information about places in St. Cloud that he might know about where he could have taken Maddie? Because that should be the first place to come to mind for her. And yet she's sending Mott in every other direction. Does that really make sense? Is she just completely dumb? Or is she being calculating here and giving them all these other places and avoiding mentioning Lake Lizzy because she doesn't want them going in that direction? They really, really had to work it hard to get that little bit of information out of her.
Yeah, those are the only places in St. Cloud that I would know, that I could think of, that he might be aware of, but...
So your gut tells us no.
Lake Lizzy, probably not. Like, does he even remember what the name of Lake Lizzy is? Probably not.
So again, even after they finally got her to talk about Lake Lizzy and they're trying to get her to focus in on it, it's interesting that she goes, well, they're the only places that I can think of that he might know about. And then she says, would he even remember the name of Lake Lizzy? I don't know. So of the places, she herself is now homing back in on Lake Lizzy. It is still significant in her mind, but she's trying to deter them from looking at Lake Lizzy. Don't look there. As far as I'm concerned, my gut tells me don't look there. Well, if I was those detectives, I would be heading that direction straight away. Now, I had some reservations about showing this particular map because I feel like I am doxing a little bit here. But that said, I know that at least one other creator has done this. And when you look at the documents, which are publicly available, you can also find this address quite easily. So the pin on the left is the location where Maddie was found. The pin on the right is the vicinity. I didn't go precisely for the spot, but it is the vicinity, very close to the location where Jen's friend lives. The distance, less than a mile. You saw on the maps before that this is essentially the back road through to Lake Lizzy. This is the road through to Lake Lizzy that Jen would know, that she would be most familiar with. Because obviously if she went hiking with her friend at Lake Lizzy, then she would have gone to her friend's place first. And we have Sylvia talking about how they would go back there for drinks after they'd finished hiking. Jen would be extremely familiar with this area. Now we know that this was probably not the chosen location where Stearns left Maddie, but that instead he had that blowout on his tyre and he had to stop. He probably looked for the first gateway where he could stop and pull off the road, and then obviously he needed to be able to get the spare tyre out of the boot, which meant he had to hide Maddie somewhere. I would imagine that when the Thomas drove past, that probably put the wind up Stefan. So even if he had been planning on picking up Maddie, putting her back in the car and continuing on to his planned destination, having a vehicle drive past, and it sounds like Thomas was paying enough attention that Stearns probably noticed that. So the option of moving Maddie at that point in time was gone for him. But we know that that's not where he had planned to take Maddie. Was the plan to go to Lake Lizzy? Was this a route that Jen said, this is the way you can go that's secluded? You can go straight around to Lake Lizzy and there's going to be pretty much no traffic, there's going to be no cameras, no one's going to see you. Or is it just one hell of a coincidence that the area that Stearns ended up happens to be the area that Jen was very carefully avoiding talking about, and just it happens that he was essentially en route, about to go past the house of the friend that Jen wanted to avoid talking about. Jen wanted them to look everywhere but in the direction where Maddie was. Coincidence? I'll let you decide. I've made up my mind, I think. But I think there definitely needs to be more questions asked. So, on that note, I'll leave it at that. I'm really looking forward to hearing your responses on this video and seeing what you particularly think about this. Is it all just one huge coincidence? Is there some logical reason why the one place that Stefan is most likely to know about is the one place that Jen wasn't talking about and was constantly trying to steer detectives away from? You tell me. So, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button because YouTube loves that and it gets my videos out there into the algorithm. And leave a comment. I'm really looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I've been